Today is Tuesday, June the 11th, 2024. My name is Crispin Brooks. I'm interviewing Shmuel Ben Shmuel on behalf of the USC Shoah Foundation. The interview is taking place in Anaheim, California, in the United States of America. The language of this interview will be English. Please state your name.
I'm Shmuel Ben Shmuel.
And what was your name at birth?
Samuel Samuelov.
And what did people call you growing up?
Sami. That was my nickname with my family, and it stuck with me, I guess, until this day. Not with everybody, but many people know me by that name.
And is there any special significance to your name? Were you named after anyone?
Yes, I was named after my paternal grandfather, as is the custom with Bulgarian Jews. People are named after grandparents. And I was named after my paternal one. My younger brother was named after my maternal grandfather.
And please tell us, when were you born?
I was born on December 22nd, 1937.
And where were you born?
I was born in Sofia, Bulgaria.
And please tell us about your father.
Well, my father's name was Eliezer Samuelov. He was, I believe, 27 when I was born. He was born in a provincial city by the name of Shumen, which is in northeastern Bulgaria. His entire family lived there, his parents, my uncle, his younger brother. They all lived in Shumen. And then at some point in the early 30s, I believe, they all left Shumen and went to live in Sofia.
And what prompted them to leave Shumen?
I guess economic opportunities. Shumen is a very out of the way, backwater type place. And Sofia presented better opportunities to make a living. I think this is pretty common among many people moving from the province to the capital.
And what was your father's profession or professions?
Well, he finished high school. That was it. I didn't go to college until much later on. And so he worked as a salesman. He worked for a Hungarian Jew that had an agricultural machinery dealership. His name was Gere. I think it was the last name. And so my father used to travel to Bulgarian villages and try to get them to buy agricultural machinery, and apparently he did okay with that. So that was really what he did. Again, it wasn't easy to make a living then, so that was it.
And how did he meet your mother?
I'm sorry?
How did he meet your mother?
My parents are cousins. First cousins. My maternal grandfather and my paternal grandmother were brother and sister, and they knew each other for a while. They didn't live in the same city, but they knew each other. Now, my mother, She finished a kindergarten academy, if you want to call it, and she became a kindergarten teacher. That's what she did for a living, and she did it in Sofia. And not sure exactly where, presumably they met in Sofia, and then they got married. And that was in 1937, and I was born at the end of the year.
And what was your mother's name?
My mother's name is Esther.
And her maiden name?
Farhi.
And was she also from Shumen or from somewhere else?
No, she was born in. Hold it for a moment. Let me check here.
We can come back.
Okay, no, got it. My mother was born in Provadia, which is yet another city in northeastern Bulgaria, not too far from Shumen.
And did you have any brothers or sisters?
I had a younger brother who passed away. He was 3 years younger than me. He too was born in Sofia. And
what was his name?
His name was Simantov. He was named after our maternal grandfather.
And you've started to tell us, but I'm wondering if you can tell us more about the sort of deeper roots of your family in Bulgaria. And you've mentioned, coming from northern Bulgaria, from Shumen and Provadia. What do you know about, grandparents and generations, older than that going back?
What I know more about my mother's family than my father's, but the family of my father lived in Shumen, as I said, and I believe they lived there for generations. My mother's family lived in Vidin, which is also in northern Bulgaria. It's on the Danube in western Bulgaria. And that's where my grandmother, my maternal grandmother was born. She had, I think, 3 siblings. Her parents, my great-grandparents, they were also from Vidin. Later on, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, moved back to Vidin. For a while, she lived in Sofia with my mom, but then she remarried. Oh, let me go back. My maternal grandfather, Simantov, after which my brother was named, he passed away when my mother was maybe 5-6 years old, meningitis. So we are talking here in 1910, mid-1910s or so. And my maternal grandmother then raised my mother in Vidin. She was next to her siblings. I mean, my grandmother's siblings. My mother was a single child. And so my grandmother had a store where she sold some kind of knickknacks, but she was helped by the family to make a living, support them. She got food from her sister, and so on. Then when my mom moved to Sofia, her mother, my grandmother, moved with her, And once my mother married my father, then my grandmother married for the second time, and then she moved back to Vidin with her second husband. And that's where they lived through the war and until actually they immigrated to Israel.
And did they ever tell you stories about the family and about life in Vidin and what it was like for them?
Not very much, but I could see that. Vidin is a small city. It is another backwater place, not very large. I did visit there about 10 years ago, 2015. I finally made a roots trip, and one of them was to Vidin. That was very interesting. I didn't even remember where the house of my grandmother was, so we did go there anyway. But at least I saw the place. Now, I do know that my grandmother's sister, Sarah, her husband was, I think, a merchant of some kind. He used to travel quite a bit to do things. She had another sister, which, no, I think I'm beginning to mix up aunts and sisters of my mother. So I'll stop there on that.
And in terms of the Jewish community that you were from, was this an Ashkenazi, a Romanyat community, or a Sephardic community?
We are Sephardi, like most Bulgarian Jews. I think maybe there were a few Ashkenazi Jews here and there, but we were mostly Sephardic.
And what can you tell us about, the Sephardic community that you were part of and what it was like, how it functioned?
Well, to me it was, I grew up like that. So I grew up with two languages right away, Bulgarian and Ladino. And it was very interesting. Bulgarian Jews in general are quite secular. So we celebrated Jewish holidays, obviously, but nothing like that, what the deeply Orthodox Jews do. We were a lot more lenient. Again, one of our, I think she was a cousin of my grandmother. She was she was a widow, didn't have much. It was very hard to make a living for her. So they would eat whatever was the cheapest, and that included non-kosher food. You have to survive. So that's what it went. Slowly, I think that still in the 19th century, Bulgarian Jews were observant, in a not a very deep religious way, quite lenient, but still. My paternal grandfather, for example, would go to the synagogue, definitely every Sabbath and all that. But then slowly they started coming out of that. My father, he rebelled against that, so he became totally unobservant, secular, and I got it from him. So the entire family was really non-observant.
And your mother too?
My mother, not so much. But again, she couldn't do too much of herself. However, come Yom Kippur, for example, we didn't fast. My mother did, and she told us, it's okay. I'm going to fast for all of us. So you don't need to do that.
And did you visit synagogue at all, or was your father against that?
We didn't go. I didn't go. I don't remember going to a synagogue, at least not very often. Yeah, I've been into a synagogue, mostly with probably my grandfather. My paternal grandfather, again, my maternal grandfather was had already passed away. So my grandfather may have taken me to a synagogue. My father refused to go there, but I didn't go there very much.
And would that have been, if your paternal grandfather took you, would that have been in Sofia or in Shumen?
No, that was in Sofia. That's again, my paternal grandparents also moved to Sofia. So the entire family, including my uncle, my father's brother, he too was in Sofia. And so essentially the entire family moved there.
And, you said you were secular. At home, did you have any kind of, were there particular holidays you did things for?
Well, actually we celebrated holidays, Rosh Hashanah, and again Yom Kippur, especially my mom. Then Passover, the Seder, that was a big thing. Entire family together. Shavuot, for example, that too was celebrated. Purim, I don't remember that much. So yeah, we do. I mean, we knew we were Jewish and we celebrated that, but again, not in a deeply religious way. It was mostly a family occasion, getting together, more than a religious one, especially for Passover, for Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, these kind of things.
Are there particular meals or foods that stick in the memory from those celebrations?
Not in particular. Well, during Passover, obviously, it was matzah and these things, but Sephardi Jews eat rice. The Ashkenazi Jews don't do that. Again, it's okay, but it was mostly the Sephardic dishes that we had. I don't think, during Shavuot, it's mostly dairy meals. So you put a lot of emphasis on dairy, milk, cheese, that kind of thing. During Passover, rice, potatoes, meat, that kind of thing. Rosh Hashanah, it had its own things. Again, you celebrate the head of the year, so an egg is considered as a beginning of a new world. All kind of symbolic foods. But again, what I remember is the Sephardic food that we had, which was quite different from the Bulgarian Gentile food. Not that, I mean, there were similar dishes, but, to this day I enjoy cooking by myself some of these things.
And what were your favorites?
There is one dish, it's called albondigas con mirinjena, which is meatballs in eggplant puree, which is very good. Then there is something called tas kebab, which is basically a meat stew. What else? Oh yeah, there is the white bean dish, which is very good. Again, specific. I mean, many kitchens have that kind of a dish, but every kitchen puts its own flavors, flavoring, spices, this kind of things. So there are quite a few of these. There are some, there is something called pastel, which is phyllo dough, and in between you have meat filling, again, with all kind of seasoning, spices and all that, and that's very good. I don't do that. Today I go for only the simple dishes. I'm doing it myself, so.
And who would have cooked in your home?
My mom. My father didn't do a thing. She would cook for him. She would make his coffee, Turkish coffee, this kind of thing. He didn't do anything. It was her. That was the custom with the Sephardic Jews in those days, in those generations, really.
So after you and your brother were born, did your mother continue to work, or was she at home?
I believe she stayed home after I was born. And at that time, she had her mother to help her. And my paternal grandparents were also there. So yeah, everybody, so she got help with me, and she stopped working. Actually, as was very typical there, my father would consider it an insult. I think that my mother stopped working right after they got married. It was a matter of honor that the man can provide for his family. He doesn't need his wife to do that. It was the kind of thing that went.
And did she have any help at home, like a maid or anything?
No. No.
Okay.
She had the help again of her mother, of her mother-in-law.
And did any of them live in the same places? I mean, in the same building as you?
Yeah, we actually lived all together. And that continued even after the war, when we got together again. So it was pretty typical. In those days, families all lived together, and everybody brought in their earnings. So it was my parents, my paternal grandparents, and also my uncle. They all lived together.
What was his name?
His name is Abraham, but he had the nickname Albert.
And can you describe your home in Sofia?
Not really, I don't remember.
What do you know about it, though?
Well, it was always a rented place, a rented apartment. We moved quite a bit. I do remember the last apartment where we lived, that was after the war. When we came back to Sofia, then my parents found that place, and we lived there until we emigrated to Israel. The other ones, I don't remember, but again, it was all rental, and Jews would tell each other when there was an available place, where are good places to live, this kind of things.
And were there particular neighborhoods in Sofia where you wanted to live or chose to live, do you know?
I don't think so. There was a neighborhood in Sofia where many Jews lived there. My parents chose not to live there, to live in better places. So that's how it went.
And what was that neighborhood called, do you know?
Yuch Bunar. That's Turkish. I'm not sure what it means.
And why do you think that they chose not to live there?
Well, it was considered kind of a lower class, I assume. So they wanted to live closer to the center of the city. And that's really what happened. They lived close to the central market in Sofia, which is also very close to the central cathedral, the parliament, this kind of thing. So it was considered as a better place.
And In terms of who you and the family socialized with, who were your friends or the family friends? Were they Jewish, not Jewish?
Both. One characteristic of Bulgarian Jews were that they lived like everybody else. You couldn't tell from the outside. They weren't going with the side locks and these hats that the ultra-Orthodox had, and so they looked like everybody else, and everybody else in Bulgaria was not that well-to-do. Bulgaria was really kind of a backwater country, one of the poorest country in Europe. I think that the only one poorer than Bulgaria was Albania. And so everybody lived at about the same level. And so Bulgarians were friends with, the Jews were friends with Bulgarians. In Shumen, which had a fairly large Turkish minority, then they were friends with the Turks. My uncle spoke fluent Turkish. But what I remember in Sofia was really, again, from the time that I can remember, which is mostly after the war, most friends were really Jewish.
And how would you mentioned your parents, living more in the center and it being considered a better neighborhood. How would you describe your family socioeconomically before the war?
I think they were just scraping by, but again, everybody was doing the same things. Again, living all together, everybody brought in. It's something like, okay, here is this week's earnings, and they gave it to, I think, my grandmother maybe, and my uncle did the same, my grandfather did so. When you combine the earnings of three people, then you can subsist.
And what do you know about, let's say, your family's kind of, perhaps your father's political outlook? He was obviously, you mentioned he was secular. Do you know anything about his or the family's kind of attitudes towards politics? Was there a particular political party or movement that they were interested in or liked or disliked?
I don't know much about that. My father was very independent-minded, very outspoken, and that wasn't a good thing after the communists came in. So he didn't like a lot of things that the communists were doing. It was okay, they preach one thing and they do something totally different. And he didn't like this, he didn't like that. So at the end, it was a good thing that we left Bulgaria, because he was pretty sure that he would land in prison at some point.
And going back to what you may know about before the war, do you know if anyone in the family went to Palestine at all?
Yeah, actually, yes. I do know. My mother's family, my grandmother's family, so that meant my maternal grandmother and her parents.
This is Rina?
No, I'm talking about Emilia. Okay. Emilia, her family, her parents and siblings, they all emigrated to Palestine in, let me see. Okay. Around 1900, they left for Palestine, and they were there for about a year and a half. That's what my mom told me. I have some pages here, notes from an interview that I interviewed my mother in 1998 or 99, I was starting to be interested in the family history. So they moved to Palestine, and after a year and a half, they ran out of money, so they went back to Bulgaria. That was that.
And other than that, do you know of any interest in Zionism among the family?
Yes. Bulgarian Jews were quite Zionist. They were, again, secular, and they deeply believed in the right of the Jewish people. They knew that Israel, well, not Israel, but Palestine, is the homeland of the Jewish people, so they were very much for living again, communism was one reason why most Bulgarian Jews left Bulgaria for Israel in 48 and 49 and so on. But being Zionist was another major reason. They would have done that, maybe not these numbers, because some people were making maybe good living and good positions would live, but still a lot of Bulgarian Jews would have left for Israel, even if there were no communism there.
And do you know of particular Zionist organizations that, was there anyone in the family that was connected with?
Not in particular. I do know that, I remember that in 48, I think, after the partition resolution in the UN in 47, and then it was clear that there is going to be a Jewish state. So we got some exhibitions from Palestine about Israel, about what's life there and this and that. I remember going to one of these. There were representatives that came in. I read somewhere that Ben-Gurion also visited Bulgaria. I don't know if I remember it right or not, but at any rate, there was a lot of interest in emigrating to Israel. Again, a main reason was that people could see what life is under communism, and when you get the chance to live that, you do.
And do you know what people in the family thought about King Boris III, like before the war, let's say, and the monarchy in general? How did?
I don't remember any of that. King Boris III, well, he was the son of King Boris the First, or I forget which one. And he was from German descent. He was German. And the reason was that when Bulgaria got its independence from Turkey, that was in 1878, all countries in Europe were monarchies, so Bulgaria had to get a king. Well, after 400 years of Turkish rule, there were no Bulgarian nobles left. So they had to gain something. So they got that guy from the little ducacy or whatever of Coburg, Habsburg, something like that. And he agreed to become a king. I guess that was better than being a nothing in Germany. Anyway, that's so at any rate. He was apparently a good king for Bulgaria, but he was German, and there was an affinity with Germany. Bulgaria, so he pushed toward that, and but again, I know only what I've read. I don't know anything. My family, I don't remember anything about that. Again, I was too young after the war, where the king was gone. So I know, I've read, I know the stories about how Bulgarian Jews were saved from being sent to the extermination camps. And there is credit given to King Boris III, but I think there is also a lot of credit given to Bulgarian clergy, the Bulgarian Orthodox clergy, parliament members, and so on. So they saved the Bulgarian Jews.
Getting back to you.
Yes, sir.
What are your very earliest memories?
I think I remember my brother being born. What I remember is that he was born in a hospital, and I remember running up and down the stairs. That's my only memory from that. I think this is my earliest memory, and I was 3 years old at the time. Whether it's real or not, I don't know, but that's about it. Then next memory, I think, is when I was maybe 6 or so, 5, 6.
And before we get there, can you talk about what you know, even if you don't personally remember it, but what you know of what happened after the outbreak of World War II?
I don't.
For you and Sophia.
Yeah, I don't remember that at all. I was wasn't even 2 years old, but we stayed in Sofia, and I assume my parents talked about that, the war, and what's going on, and all that. Don't remember really anything.
Did you know anything? I mean, there were various anti-Jewish laws that were passed. Do you know there was a particular one, the Defence of the Nation law that was in January 41 that started restrictions against Jews? Was there anything, any way that you know that impacted you or your family?
Yes. Again, I don't remember that, but I know that one of these laws said that Jews cannot live in the capital anymore. They have to go somewhere, wherever. They have to get out. So we left, and we went to Vidin to live with my maternal grandmother and her husband. That was back in either 42 or 43. Again, I'm not sure about the dates. I know that we got back to Sofia when the war ended, which was in September of 44. That's when the Red Army occupied Bulgaria, and the war was over for us. But we moved to Vidin. Again, it was my mother and my younger brother and I. My dad, I think, was taken to some work camp. That was one of the things that the Bulgarians did to kind of quiet down the Germans, which really wanted the Jews taken to the extermination camps. But it was kind of, but my father had, they gave leaves of absence to everybody. So they worked during summertime. During the winter, they went home. So my dad stayed with us.
Do you know the name of the camp that he was sent to?
I don't know. I don't remember. I know only stories. I know that both my father and my uncle were in these camps. They took the able-bodied Jews to work there. But other than that, Jews were forced to leave yellow stars. That was I remember that one.
Did you have one on your clothing? Or?
No, it was only for the adults. We were not considered worthy enough, I guess, to have them.
So who wore them and where did they wear them?
They wore them, I guess, on the left side of the shirt. My mother had one. There are some pictures, and maybe it will show it, one of them. I'm not sure.
And what do you remember of the journey from Sofia to Vidin? How did you get there?
By train. This was the common means of transport. Trains were very good in Bulgaria, so from Sofia to Vidin took a couple of hours, and we got there, and we were met at the train station by my grandmother, and she took us home.
So, what about leaving your place in Sofia? What do you remember? Do you remember?
Nothing.
And were you forced to get on the train? Were there soldiers or police that escorted you? Or
I don't think so. They were given, they were quite tolerant, lenient, so to speak. Okay, you have to leave, and you have, I'm assuming, okay, you have to leave by the end of the month or something like that. And they started talking where to go, what to. In those days, there were not many phones, but we used telegrams. So then we went to.
So you had the choice of where to go to?
Oh yeah, you were forced to leave, but you could decide where to go, and people usually went to stay with family in the province.
And do you remember what you took with you?
I think we took a couple of suitcases, and that was about it. Not much. I don't know what happened to the rest of the household furniture, and I'm assuming it stayed there. It was left with neighbors, maybe. I don't think my parents ever got that back. But it's poor.
And tell me about the train journey and going to Vidin.
Don't remember very much. I remember being on the train, that I remember, but that's about it. I probably slept throughout the journey. I do remember a different train trip, which was after the war ended. Then in Vidin, we were in Vidin, and we were all four of us. My father was back with us, and my paternal grandparents, they too had to leave Sofia, so they moved back to Shumen. So they rented a place there, and I think that my uncle was also with them. Anyway, so we left Vidin, but before going back to Sofia, my parents decided to make a little vacation out of that. So first we took the train to Shumen. We stayed there for a while. I remember that. I remember being with my grandfather. Shumen has a pretty high and steep ridge over the city. And I remember my grandfather taking me up that ridge. And after not too long, I got tired. He had to take me back. So anyway, we stayed there for a while. And then we took the train again, and we went to Varna, which is on the Black Sea. And we stayed there in a hotel. I remember that. Again, that was short vacation. And then from Varna to Sofia. What I remember is on the way back, in one of the train stations, that was in a place near a lake that had some freshwater lobsters or something like that. And they were selling them at the train station. They weren't very big, but so my father grabbed a bag of these, and I remember it. They were pretty good. So much for observing religious.
So, after going back to the wartime, who met you in Vidin when you were expelled from Sofia and you got the train to Vidin? Who met you there, and what happened next?
Well, we were met by my grandmother. We got to her place. In those days, this kind of transportation was by a horse carriage. The horse, there were almost no taxis. They came after the war, I think, maybe even before the war, I don't know. But at any rate, the common transportation means was a horse-drawn carriage. So we got one of these, and they took us to my grandmother's place.
And describe her place.
Don't remember much of it, but it was sitting on its own. It was kind of in the country, not in the country, but it was in an open area of the city. It wasn't very big, but again, people were used to living in small places. It was nice, from what I remember. Again, don't remember very much. It was nice that my mother was very happy to have her mother help with the kids.
And you must have been there about a year and a half or so.
Yeah, about a year and a half to.
And do you have any sense of normal life during that time? What that was like?
To me, it was mostly, I think, about getting food. I mean, we didn't starve. We didn't eat very well, maybe, but we didn't starve. And I don't recall any of that, but my parents, my mother, my grandmother, they supported us and they provided for us. So apparently there was enough food, but it was simple food, nothing special indeed. What I remember is that you could get very good yogurt from street vendors who would pass by in the street, and they would sell you yogurt from large flat containers. I remember that. Then there was a delicacy which is fried kind of a dough, mekitzi. That's the name of that. It was again very good. I liked it very much. So it was tasty.
Do you remember playing at all at that time or having friends?
I'm sure we played. Don't remember much of that. Again, I was 4 or 5 years old maybe. Not much memory there.
Any birthdays?
I'm sure we celebrated that. Again, what's there? I mean, people didn't have much means to buy you anything to get, but you celebrate it. And again, I don't remember any of that.
And either before the war in Sofia or during the war in Sofia or Vidin, were you aware of any anti-Semitism?
No, nothing at all. But again, I was a child. I'm sure there were some things, okay? Again, being sent to a work camp is obviously anti-Semitic. But again, as a child, as a toddler, you're not aware of any of these things.
And do you remember anything your parents might have said or grandparents?
No, not really. I know that they knew about the extermination camps. I remember my paternal grandfather saying something, it doesn't matter, we will all be sent to die. So they knew about that. And I think when he said that, that was still in Sofia. So it wasn't something that came up later in the war. It was known. And
what else do you remember about your time in Vidin?
My mother would take us to walk here and there. There is a picture of us sitting on the Danube River, and there are pictures of us playing in playgrounds, in parks. Bulgaria is pretty good with parks and playgrounds, so I know I did that. There are pictures to show that. And that's about it. Again, when you're a child, that's all you want to do anyway.
When you think back, would you describe it as a happy childhood?
Yes, very much so. We were taken care of, we were loved, so there was nothing that really needed to be upset about. We were shielded pretty well. And again, the war didn't reach Bulgaria. Much later, actually, it did, but much later in the war, because again, there was no German army in Bulgaria. We weren't occupied. But I know that Sofia was bombed. And I do remember something that already mentioned, that a train trip. During that train trip I'm pretty sure it was from Vidin to Shumen, after the war ended in Bulgaria. Then I remember that I fell asleep in the train. It was a night trip. I fell asleep, and then I woke up because the train had stopped. And they say the train had stopped because they're bombing the railroad ahead of us. Another thing that I do remember from Vidin, I remember during the day standing there with some people, and I heard the noise, kind of a noise that bees maybe back, buzz, and somebody said, "Oh, they're flying to Romania." So when I looked up, there was a huge number of planes, very high. These were American planes flying from Italy to the oil fields in Romania to bomb them. So I remember that. I saw that it was huge number of planes. So that's one memory that I have. Another one is that apparently they bombed also in Bulgaria. I do know that they bombed some buildings in Sofia when we did the route trip to Bulgaria. That was back in 2015. Then our guide showed us the damage. They still hadn't repaired the damage. I didn't even remember that Sofia was bombed. I knew that they flew over Sofia because Vidin was in the junction of Romania, Bulgaria, and Yugoslavia. So from Italy, they passed over there to the oil fields. So, but I didn't know that they also bombed Bulgaria.
Do you know much about the role of church leaders in terms of what was happening to Jews in Vidin?
Not in particular in Vidin, but I know that the Vidin Jews were helped, supported by the general population. That's what I know. When we visited Vidin again in 2015, there is a plaque there in Bulgarian and in Hebrew thanking the Bulgarians for their help in saving the Jews. We'll never forget you. Appreciate that and all that. So took a picture of that, still have it. I think that the attitude in Vidin was similar to everywhere in Bulgaria, which is that the general population was very comfortable with Jews living among them. That include the clergy. The Bulgarian Orthodox Church was never anti-Semitic, from all I know. Again, most of what I know is from reading, not from memory.
And was there any awareness at all of, because there were deportations of Jews from areas that Bulgaria occupied during the war?
No.
Parts of Thrace and so forth?
I didn't know any of that. All I know is what I have read. It happened in southern Bulgaria, Macedonia, and Trachea, and we were in Vidin in the north. So I think that the Jews of, I think, Houstondale and similar places which were close there, they tried to help these Jews. They gathered some food to give them. The Jews were already on the trains, and they tried to help them as much as they could. But again, this is something that I have read.
And what do you remember of the arrival of the Soviets?
Not much. I do remember being told about that. The Soviets acted as an occupation army. They didn't act very well. The reputation of the Red Army, of what they did in the liberated countries, was really quite damning. Rapes, killings, murders. They did the same thing in Bulgaria. I do remember a story from my father that one evening he was with some friends walking somewhere in Sofia, and here comes that drunk Russian soldiers, and he tried to get hold of a woman there, and my father and his friends distracted him and let the woman escape, and that soldier got really mad, so they had to run away. He was going to kill them. So that's what, again, this is something that I heard from my dad. Not very pleasant.
And do you remember, you actually did talk a little bit about leaving Vidin and going on the little mini tour of Bulgaria on the way back to Sofia. Can you tell us a bit more about that and your subsequent life in Sofia?
Well, when we got back to Sofia, I was 6 years old, getting on 7. And in Bulgaria, you start school at 7 years. So they enrolled me in school. First in a public school. And then my dad decided that he wants something better for me. So he enrolled me in a French Jesuit school, which was where monks taught there. That's where I learned French and math and all these subjects. There were also subjects which were mandated by the state, so Bulgarian history, geography, this kind of thing. But this was a much better school, especially in the sciences. And again, this is where I learned some French. And that was where I was in my first 4 years of elementary school. Then that started in the fall of 44 through the summer of 48. And at that time, the communist government decided that they don't want a French school there, so they closed it down. And then I had to enroll in public school. So that was started there in the fall of 48. And then in April of 49, we emigrated to Israel, so we didn't stay there for very long. When we got back to Sofia, my parents found that apartment that I was telling you, and I visited there during my roots trip.
Do you remember the address or the name of the neighborhood?
I remember the address. I remember what the place looked like. When we left Bulgaria, I was 11 years old, so I remember quite a few things, yes.
So tell us, where was it?
The address is 50 Maria Luisa Boulevard. Here is a funny thing. A few days ago, my in-law, the parents of my older son's wife, she texted me. She has a niece, actually it's her husband, doesn't matter. The niece lives in Greece, but she was in Bulgaria at that time. We're talking just a few days ago, and the niece asked where we lived in Bulgaria. So I told her in Sofia and gave her the address. So she sent us a picture of the apartment building. And I said, yeah, that's it. Top floor, that's where we lived. Now, in those days, accommodations were scarce. So this was a something like 3 or 4 bedroom place. And we were 3 families there. Our family, which is my parents, my brother and I, my grandparents, paternal grandparents, I should say, and another family, friends of my father, which they had 2 girls. And we all shared the common kitchen, this kind of thing. So we all lived there until obviously we left for Israel. Okay, my dad, when we got back, well, he had to make a living, so he decided that he's going to have a foundry. They got hold of the downed planes. Quite a few apparently were downed, so they used the aluminum from these planes, they melted it, and they used it to make spoons, forks, knives, and that's what he did for a living. There is a story, he did that with my uncle, and I think also my grandfather, paternal grandfather, and they falling off and so on. But my dad also decided that it's time for him to get his college degree. So he enrolled in the Sofia University in mechanical engineering. And that was back in probably 46, I think. Not sure. Anyway, he completed, I think, 3 years out of 4. And then he decided that he's not going to complete his degree there. He was concerned that they won't let him leave. They would keep him. They would want an engineer. So he left before he finished. And when we got to Israel, he tried to finish that, but he couldn't. In those days in Israel, they were not very much interested in that. We were put in immigration camp in Pardes Chana, and my dad wanted to move to an immigration camp with Haifa so as to be able to attend the Technion. And so he went to ask for that, and he was told that, no, you cannot do that, we will not let you move. If we need engineers, we'll bring in from America. So he decided to give up on that.
Going back to the sort of period with the Soviet occupation and then the emergence of communist rule in Bulgaria, Can you talk about what you saw or were aware of at that time, and how that affected the family?
Well, we didn't see much of the Red Army. I think they left pretty fast because Bulgaria was actually quite fond of Russia. The reason being that, again, the Russian Tsar was instrumental in helping Bulgaria attain its independence from Turkey. To this day, there is a statue of King, I think it's Alexander something, second, third, whatever, the savior of Bulgaria, right smack in the center of Sofia and all that. So Bulgaria also refused a German demand to send military, the Bulgarian army, to fight in the Soviet Union. They refused to do that. So the Soviet Union was pretty sure of Bulgarian loyalty. They didn't need to keep an occupation army there for very long. The Bulgarian communist government was very loyal to them and all that. So that I remember. So during my 4 years in the French school, I didn't see much of that. But then in public school, that was a different story. They taught Russian. That was that was a must. Again, things like all kinds of fables about, Stalin is a genius. He reads 400 pages a day. All kind of, as a child, you're 9, then you come home and you tell that, and your parents roll their eyes. What can you do? When you're a child, you trust what you're told. So, again, it was very suffocating for the adults. For the children, well, you're a child, you're in the pioneer movement, and you have a red tie and this and that. So a lot of nonsense. But again, nothing really. I think that things got serious much later on when you became older. At that age, it wasn't really too bad.
And can you talk about the reasons or any particular incidents that prompted you to emigrate?
Well, again, my dad was very outspoken, and he wasn't afraid to criticize the government, to criticize the Soviet Union, tell jokes about that, and so on. And so he was concerned that at some point they're going to grab him and just throw him to prison. So when the opportunity, everybody felt that way in some form. Even people who were not outspoken, you never knew what's going to happen to you. They were grabbing people and, imprisoning them, and it wasn't pleasant. You lived in fear. You lived in fear of being taken away. So that was really the major thing.
And when you left, or when you decided to leave, did you know other Jewish families that had also gone before you?
Yes, we knew. The way it worked in Bulgaria was that there was a specific ship that was stationed in Burgas, which is a port on the Black Sea. And every month it would have a trip to Israel. About 5,000 people would go on every trip. So the way they organized it is you put your name on a list, that's what I assume, and they gave you a date where you would live for Israel. And so that's how it went. When the time,
What's the ship?
don't remember the name. What I remember is that when the time came, we boarded a train in Sofia to Burgas, and then we boarded the ship. Then the ship took over. It took, I think, 3 or 4 days to get to Israel. We passed through the Bosphorus at night, so I didn't see it. When I woke up and got out, we were already in the Dardanelles Strait. So, but that was also okay. My dad told me that he got up to see the Bosphorus, and he debated with himself whether to wake me up or not. Decided not to. All right. So that's how we left for Israel, and so 50,000, 5,000 people. So maybe less than that. I don't know. I know that they started in 48. These trips continued in 49, maybe 50. Maybe not every trip had 5,000 people on it. But then again, and all that time, Jews were getting ready to leave, and in the end, out of the 50,000, there may be 2,000 or 3,000 left. One of the ones that did stay was a cousin of my mother. She was a professor at Sofia University, so she decided that she has a lot to lose. Her husband was a mid-level functionary in, I think, the Interior Ministry. So again, he had a good position. So they decided to stay, and they did.
And what were their names?
Her name was Estrella, I believe, and he was, don't remember his name at the moment.
I meant to ask actually earlier. Do you know were there many intermarriages or mixed marriages between the Sephardic community and either other Jewish communities, Ashkenazi Jews, for example, in Bulgaria, or with non-Jews?
I don't remember much with non-Jews. I do remember that family that lived with us in Maria Luisa. The wife was Ashkenazi. It was Sephardi, but the wife was Ashkenazi. And that cousin of my mother that stayed in Sofia, she was married to an Ashkenazi. I think he was a Romanian Jew, if I remember it right. But yeah, he was an Ashkenazi for sure.
And are you aware when there was this kind of wave of Jewish emigration out of Bulgaria, what were the attitudes of sort of local non-Jewish Bulgarians to this? Do you know anything about that?
Well, one guy said, "Could you put me in a suitcase and take me with you?" They were kind of envious that we could live. I mean, it was bad for everybody. And it became even worse, much worse after that. But yeah, they were envious of us. What I can tell you is that back in 48, in mid-May, when Israel was proclaimed a state, I was still in the French school, and I remember one of the teachers, he was a Bulgarian, so he taught something, maybe Bulgarian language or history, I don't remember what. He talked about that, he congratulated. There were many Jews in that French school. I wasn't the only one. It's typical Jewish attitude. get the best get your kids educated. So he congratulated all of us Jewish kids that you have now. It's a small state, but congratulations, you deserve it. Good luck with that. So I remember that. The attitude was generally very positive. And the Jews living, well, it was fully understood. You have your state now, so you can live. Also, given what was happening in Bulgaria, it was very, we weren't the only ones that left, that wanted to live. The others just couldn't.
And what do you remember of your arrival in Israel and how that was for you and the family?
I remember coming down from that ship. That was in Haifa. The ship landed in Haifa. And I know that people went down and kissed the land, the earth, when that happened. So I do remember that I think it was pretty late in the day. We went through some reception place, and my parents obviously took care of that. I didn't do much of anything. And then we were taken over to that immigration camp, which was in an ex-British military camp. It was in Pardes Chana. And we stayed there for a while.
And can you talk about, over the next year or two, what was it like to adjust to life in Israel, for you and for your parents, grandparents?
Very hard. It's not easy. It's a new place. You don't know the language. You don't know the customs. I remember the men, my father and friends and so on, staying in a group and say, oh, we could do so well here if we just knew the conditions and all that. But we don't know, so it was very hard in those days. The state, Israel, brought you to Israel, and that was it. You were on your own. So you had to find out what to do. Many people many Bulgarian Jews went for Jaffa, Yafo, a big concentration. My dad decided that he doesn't want us to grow in that kind of a place. So, meaning there was an opportunity. He was looking. So, again, we arrived in April in Israel, and in January we moved to a moshav, to a farming community. The name was Cherut. And my father decided that we would be better off growing up in a clean place, not in a city and this kind of thing. It was a mistake because my parents were already in their mid-30s. They were not designed to be farmers. So it took a few years, but that ended. Back in the camp, I went to school. There was school there, but lots of kids from various ages attended, and it was mostly like babysitting more than teaching anything. Once we got to Cherut, to Tel Mond, that's when I went to a real school. By that time, I've already learned a little bit of Hebrew, so I could attend. It wasn't easy at the beginning because, again, the language was not really, I wasn't fluent in Hebrew and all that, but that's okay. It took a couple of months and so on, maybe a year, and I adjusted. It helped that in that school, again, I'm talking about Tel Mond, there were a lot of immigrant kids I wasn't the only one. There were also a lot of Sabras, but that was okay.
And did your parents continue to try and, hang out with other Bulgarian Jews, or?
No, the reason being we were the only Bulgarian family in Herut. When we got to Herut, the Herut was a place of maybe 120 families, and then we had the new development, Archava, as they call it, and that's where they put 20 more immigrant families, and none of them were Bulgarians. There were some Bulgarian families in the more general area, not in Herut. Herut was part of a group of Moshavim it's called Tel Mond. So the Gush Tel Mond, they call Tel Mond block of. So there were some Moshavim, and there were also some other places. And the school was for everybody in those days. And so, there were some Bulgarian Jews there, but not very many.
And how did things develop in terms of your education moving forward?
Well, it wasn't a very good school, but again, it's okay. So when I got there, I actually lost a year. When I left Bulgaria, I was in 5th grade. So when we got to Tel Mond, then I went back to 5th grade. And I could have maybe jumped the grade. It was my choice, but I decided not to, because in 6th grade, that's where they started teaching English. And I said, well, I wouldn't know anything about that if I jump a grade. So I decided to stay there. I did jump a grade later on. Tel Mond was a school for, in general, an agricultural community, all these Moshavim there. The way it went was that you stayed there through the hand of mid-school, 8th grade, and when it was over, one of two things happened. The boys went to one of the two agricultural schools. One of them is Mikveh Israel. The other one was, it will come back to me maybe. The girls were to a teacher seminar maybe, or they simply stayed home. And so we're talking age 14 here. So they would stay home and work with the family and all that. My dad was very concerned about me. There was nothing really close by for me to attend. And in those days, it was quite difficult to get around in Israel. You could get by a bus. Not very many people had their own cars. And the closest high school was in Netanya. So that one we were traveling quite a bit. And but then he heard that there is a new place that opens up that year. We're talking about 1953, in Haifa, in the Reali school. And that was a military academy. And it just happened that the commander of that academy was married to a woman from Herut. So my father went to talk to him, and he said, yeah, he can apply, but not now, because in the military academy, you went to only the last 2 years of high school, so it would be junior and senior years of high school. So I need 2 years to get there. So that's where I jumped a grade, because in Telmont there were still 2 more grades left. After 8th grade, there were 9th and 10th grade, and some people stayed, mostly girls. They didn't know what better to do, so they continued. So I did jump a grade from 8th grade to 10th grade, stayed there, and then the year after that, I went to that military academy.
In Haifa?
In Haifa.
Did the whole family move with you? Or?
No, it was just me. This was total, we lived there.
Like a boarding school?
A boarding, I'm sorry, you're right. That's what they told us. The name at that time was we are in the military boarding school.
And did you then go on to do military service?
After that, yeah. But the main thing was that I attended the Reali school, high school, which was considered one of the best in Israel. And then once it was over, yeah, I did my military service. In those days, it was 2.5 years for boys, for men, 2 years for women. So I went there, did my military service, and ended up in the tank corps, in the armored corps, with tanks, lieutenant. I had a platoon of tanks, commanded a platoon of tanks and all that. Then later on, I instructed in a tank commander's course. That was it. But I could say that I didn't like military life at all. Didn't appeal to me. So I knew I was not going to do that. And my dad was pushing me for a long, long time to be an engineer. Because he didn't finish his. So, and both his sons did that. So it was pretty obvious, and I had no problem with that. I was good in the math and physics and all that. Did very good in that, in the matriculation exams too. So, yeah, I went to the Technion and...
So after completing military service?
Yes. So I had to wait. I didn't finish in time. You could get exempt from the last few months of your service. So after 2 years, you could go in and start in college. I didn't do that. So for me, it was 3 years. And so I applied to and got accepted to the aeronautics department. Aeronautics, that's aeronautical engineering department. And that's what I did. Took 4 years.
And roughly what years would that have been?
Started in the fall of 59, graduated in 63.
And what happened after that? Did you start to work at that point, or more university time? Or?
Well, yes and no. It was common, quite customary in our department, to go for a few months to work in France. At that time, we had some pretty good relations with France. The only requirement was that you speak French. So we were taught French. Again, I had some French, I think, left over from my first few years in school, even though I've lost most of it. But it came back. It's okay. So we left in the summer of 63. And I came back in, I think, February of 64. In the meantime, I worked it was kind of internship in a place that made jet engines. So it was quite educational. Of course, it was nice living in France and all that. Then I got back and I stayed in Haifa at the Technion. Stayed there for a few years, working in the aeronautical labs. They have wind tunnels there and other things. So I worked in that, and I also started working on my master's degree.
And did you serve in the army in 1967? Were you called into the army?
Yes. By that time, I was already out of the tanks. They found out that my hearing got damaged pretty heavily. So what they call a medical profile was lowered. I was asked if I want to volunteer and stay with the tanks. I said no. I still need my hearing, whatever is left of it. So I was assigned to a second echelon infantry unit. And during the 67 war, we were not on the front lines, but we held some position on the Lebanon border, which was very quiet at that time. There was no Hezbollah then. Nothing of that was there. And we stayed right at the edge of the Galilee. Below us was the Hula Valley, and across that was the Golan Heights. And during the 6-day war, nothing happened there until the war ended in the Sinai and in the West Bank. So on Friday, that's where the war started in the Golan Heights. And what we could see there was very interesting. You could see that they were fighting on the Golan Heights. You could see an artillery barrage starting down there and moving up. And on Saturday, it continued all the way to the top of the heights. So we saw the war there. We didn't participate, but we saw the war.
And after the war, did you continue your studies, or were you?
I was still at the Technion. That was 67. By that time, I already started working part-time at the Israel aircraft industry. And at the end of 67, I left the Technion and went to work at Israel. So I started there on January 1st, 68. And I worked there in designing an inlet for a new jet engine that they were putting on a Mirage airplane. So the inlet on that place is mine. It's all mine. So I stayed there for a few years, 4.5 years. And then I decided to, by that time I already finished my master's degree. I didn't finish it while I was still at the Technion. I actually switched the topic of my dissertation to that inlet, jet engine inlet that I worked on. And so then I decided to pursue the PhD. And for that, my master's advisor told me that it is a good idea to do it in a different place. You did your bachelor's and master's at the Technion. Yeah, some people continued for their PhD also at the Technion, but his advice was go somewhere else. So I did. I came to the States, to Case Western Reserve University. That was in 73. And
so you weren't involved in the 73 war?
No.
Okay.
We came to the States in August of 73, and the war started in October of 73.
How was that, sort of witnessing that from afar?
Yes,
How did that feel to you?
bad, really bad. They were looking for volunteers to go back to Israel, and I considered that, but at that time that wasn't really a very good option. I was already married with 3 children in the States, so I didn't want to leave them alone. Yeah, friends and the community would help, but it wasn't a good idea. Besides, I was already out of the tanks for something like close to 10 years. And so what would I do? What could I help with? Yeah, I'm sure I could have done something, but it didn't seem to be a very good idea. So I didn't go back to Israel. Anyway, so I stayed there and finished my research. And then I moved to Southern California. I got an offer to work on the space shuttle, which I did. I wasn't done with my PhD. I still hadn't written my thesis, my dissertation, so I did it while working here. Took a while. When you work full time, it takes a while to write that. But finally, in '82, I managed to go back to Cleveland and did my dissertation defense. So passed on that one, got the PhD, and that was that. So I was with Rockwell, working on the space shuttle, and as usual, my field was aerodynamics. You have to understand one thing about the space shuttle, which is that when it takes off, it takes about a minute and a half maybe, to go through the atmosphere and then get up to more rarefied heights. So there isn't much time that this vehicle stays in the atmosphere. So why do you need aerodynamics? It's not an airplane which is flying in the air. Well, the reason is that the concern is about the aerodynamic loads, the forces that act because of the airflows. And there are limits there. Space shuttle had some very susceptible areas. You could not exceed certain loads. And then during liftoff, the vehicle would turn, lie on its back, and attain an angle which allowed it to decrease that air loads. At some point, you reach an altitude of max Q, which is the altitude of the maximum air loads. And after that, things got easier. But it was important to predict the aerodynamic loads. Because of that, I got involved very heavily in something called computational fluid dynamics, which is simulation of flow. We had a memorandum of agreement with NASA Ames in Mountain View up in the Bay Area. And they had at that time a very strong CFD, Computational Fluid Dynamics department. And I worked with them, we did work with them about simulating the space shuttle on that. Rockwell also had something called the Science Center in Thousand Oaks. They too had a CFD department, so they were both working on this problem. At some point, we ended the NASA Ames. We didn't go there anymore. We continued with the Science Center. But at that time, the program was winding down. We are talking about the space shuttle development. So at some point you have developed and you fly, and that's that. So you don't need all that many engineers anymore. So that came to an end. Layoff started, and at some stage I was also laid off, and that was there. So you want to continue with that?
I wanted to ask, you mentioned your wife and children. When did they come into your life?
Oh, I was at the Technion at the time. I met my wife. That was in 1966. We got married at the end of the year. And then our first son was born in 67, in August of 67, when I was still at the Technion. Then when I worked with Israel Aircraft Industry, we stayed for a little while with my parents. They were still in Telmont. They lived in Telmont, not in Herut anymore, but they moved to Telmont. And we stayed with them for about a year and a half. And I was commuting to the Israel Aircraft Industry. I finally had a car, so I could drive there. Then both my parents and us, we moved to Rehovot. My parents bought a place there, and we bought an apartment also nearby, so my mother could help my wife with that. My wife worked. She was a nurse, so she kept working, both in Telmont and also when we lived in Rehovot. And while we were in Telmont, our daughter was born, and in Rehovot, our younger son was born. So we have a child from each place where we lived.
And can you tell us a little bit about your wife and her background?
Well, my wife is from Telmont. She's from a Yemenite ancestry, and she lived in a Yemenite neighborhood. Her parents were there. She attended the same Telmont school that I did, but 2 or 3 years, 2 years I think, younger than me. But she was in the same class as my younger brother, so they met there. Once she was done, she went to Haifa to a nursing school. That's where she attained her degree. She has 4 brothers. Yeah, 4 brothers. 2 of them have already passed away. Only the youngest one is left. There is another one, but he's not that well. So that's about her. And then once we got married, she continued working. She kept working both in Telmont and we lived in Rehovot. So we needed that. In Israel, you need 2 incomes. At that time, you needed 2 incomes, even with an engineering salary.
And your parents, did they stay in Israel, or did they emigrate to here to the US as well?
No, they stayed in Israel. We left in 73. July, August, no, it was July, late July. Then obviously the Yom Kippur War in October of 73. And then in December of that year, my father passed away. He was 63. He had several strokes. The last one killed him. It didn't help that he was very outspoken, easy to angry, and everything, he got mad about everything, about this and that, and he was told, you will die young, and that's what happened. So, my mother stayed in Israel. She outlived him by almost 30 years. She was close to 90 when she passed away. So she stayed in Rehovot, which is where they lived when it happened, when my father passed away. And then a few years later on, when it became clear that we are not going back to Israel, then she decided to move to be close to my brother. He was living, his wife and family were living in Kiryat Bialik, which is north of Haifa. And so she found a place, she bought an apartment not too far from them. The idea being that when the time comes, then my sister-in-law can help her. Well, what happened was that my sister-in-law got cancer. She passed away when she was only 43. And my mother ended up taking care of her. So much for that. But again, she survived.
And your brother?
My brother passed away. He was also not very young, not very old. He was 68 when he passed away. He was kind of getting in weight. Didn't look like me at all. We were the same height, but he was much obese, more obese, and his son convinced him to maybe go and do this tying the stomach thing. Before you do that, you need to go undergo some very significant medical checks. So they found out that he has an abdominal aorta aneurysm. And they say, okay, you need to take care of that before we do anything. So he went under the knife, and that got taken care of. That was repaired, but something was released, the blood, a lot of junk, and took a few days, but his system started shutting down and he passed away. So, but again, he had to do that surgery because without that, he could have ruptured on its own, and that was even worse. So that was him. So that was the end of my family. Actually, he outlived my mother, so he was the last one to pass away from my immediate family.
You mentioned earlier a bit about this. Perhaps you can talk more about going back to Bulgaria to visit the places you'd grown up and where you went through the war and immediate post-war. Can you talk about that trip and who you went with and what that was like for you?
Yeah, that was interesting.
What year was that?
That was in 2015. I was already retired at the time. I had retired a year earlier. Actually, the trip was planned for 2014. However, just a couple of weeks after I retired, found out that I have cancer. So I got the cancer treatment, and that was successful. Then they recommended that I do a stem cell transplant. I was with Kaiser at the time. Kaiser had an agreement with City of Hope because they don't do stem cell transplants. So I went there to City of Hope, and we did that. I was already out of the cancer, cleared by that time, but they said they've seen markers that indicate that I'm at a high risk of recurrence. And doing the stem cell transplant will reduce the risk by a lot. Instead of being in the 80% rate, maybe down to the 20. So, and I needed to do that after the first time that I was cured from the cancer.
Did you have chemotherapy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had 6 sessions of chemotherapy, and well, that was okay. So they said, okay, if you want to do the stem cell, you have to do it now. If you wait until you have a relapse, second time you won't be able to do it. It's not effective. So I did that, and I've been clear since then. So I'm considered cured, which is a good thing. So, but that meant that I had to postpone the trip to Bulgaria for the next year. The way we did it is we went with my wife on the river cruise, on the Danube cruise. We started in Vienna through Budapest and then all the way to the Black Sea. On the way we stopped in Vidin. That's where I visited that place again. We stopped in Ruse and saw a few things. And then we ended up in Constanța in Romania. They took us to Bucharest. We spent a day there and then everybody flew home. We flew to Sofia. And because I have the range with a travel agent, a separate trip, after trip to Bulgaria. And we arranged everything, where to go, what to see, and so on. Obviously, Vidin, the north of Bulgaria, we have already seen that during the river cruise. So we flew to Sofia, and we spent about 10 days in Bulgaria. Started in Sofia, and it was a very nice trip. We had a guide just to ourselves. We had a car with a driver, and that was for us. And for these 10 days, everything, it was something like $1,200 for each one of us. Bulgaria is a very inexpensive place to this day. So we started in Sofia, then a couple of days, museums and this and that. Then we traveled to the Rila Monastery, continued to Bansko, Plovdiv, I believe, Kazanluk, which is the Rose oil center, continued to the north to Varna. Yes, continued to Varna. From Varna, we went to Shumen. I have asked specifically for Shumen, so we did a trip there. They have a very nice, extensive monument up that ridge that I was telling you about Bulgaria's history. Very nice. From Shumen back to Varna, then back to Sofia. Then in Sofia, we spent probably half a day. We went to the last place where we lived on that Maria Luisa Boulevard. We also went over to the Bulgarian registry because I didn't have a birth certificate. I have a note that I was born where my parents were, and that was good for the christening ceremony. That's it, but no birth certificate. So our tour guide took us. It took a couple of tries, couple of places, then she found the right place, and I got it. And that was it. So it was very nice. We really enjoyed it. It's a good place to visit. It's a beautiful country.
When you were there, I mean, do you still speak fluent Bulgarian?
It's not that fluent, but yeah, I speak it. But yeah, I get by very easily. My accent isn't the right one, but that's okay.
What would the right one be?
Well, no, I put the emphasis on the wrong syllable. My mother was telling me, you talk like an Armenian. But that's okay. I can get by very easily. It will take me probably a couple of weeks to adjust and to get into the flow of things. I can still read it. So I was okay with that.
And how did it feel to be back there? Was it just like being a tourist, or did it feel more than that to you?
It was a tourist. I didn't feel like that being home. After so many years being away, I don't know, what, 50, 60, or whatever. No, wait a minute. I was in my late 70s. So, yeah, that's over 60 years, yeah. So, no, it's not home anymore. Yeah, it's a familiar place. It's a place that you like. I liked it very much, and good memories and all that, but it's not home.
And you mentioned there was your mother's cousin and her husband who'd stayed.
They stayed. By the time we got there, they've already passed away. There are two girls, which one of them was my age, the other one was younger. Anyway, they had already emigrated to Israel. It was long before we got there, so there was nobody left. One problem that Bulgarian Jews had after just about everybody left for Israel was these two girls had to marry Bulgarians, Gentiles. There weren't Jews available for that, but that's okay. They emigrated. The husbands emigrated with them to Israel, and as far as I know, they both live in Israel. I didn't meet them. I haven't met them, so I don't know.
A question: Did you ever apply for or receive reparations from the German government at all, or was that not applicable to Bulgaria?
No, it is applicable. I received something now because we are considered survivors. After all, we were driven out of Sofia. We were exiled from Sofia. My father worked in a war camp. The Yellow Star, the restrictions, all that applied to everybody. And so, yeah, we were finally recognized a few years back by the German government, and we are eligible indeed for whatever they're giving us.
And how did that sort of those reparations feel to you? Did it feel sufficient, or?
It comes very late. I mean, I was, already late 70s, maybe early 80s, before it started. I mean, I was only 6, 7 years old when the war ended. So, but again, I'm thankful for that, you know. It's whatever. It took time for them, for Germany to recognize that. It took time for the claims committee conference to negotiate these things. They kept adding places and countries to the ones eligible. Obviously, survivors of the death camps came in very early, okay, and that's understandable. And then later on, more places, more countries were added, and finally it was our turn. I can tell you that my parents didn't get anything, as far as I know. I don't think that my brother got anything. I know that some of my family didn't get anything because they were born after the war. You have to have been born before the war ended in order to. Actually, your mother had to be pregnant with you before the war ended. They would still be eligible. But if you were not, then forget it. But again, I'm not really, I'm grateful for whatever I'm getting. I don't have an issue with that.
I wanted to ask, in your time, I asked earlier about Bulgaria, but in your time in the US, did you ever experience any anti-Semitism?
I would say yes. It's not very open. It's kind of, all of a sudden people don't like you for no good reason. And I could feel that from some individuals, okay? And then there was an issue when I was laid off. There were quite a few Jews working on CFD, and all of the Jews were laid off. You can take it as you want it. Was it anti-Semitism or not? Try to prove it, though. So, but yeah, you can feel the attitude of some people.
Can you tell us about that? What kind of things happen or don't happen?
No, most people are okay. You're open about that, and yeah, I'm Jewish. So what? And you're Christian or you're Lutheran or whatever. So what? Doesn't mean anything. I'm here as an immigrant. I'm an American. I work for this country. I did my share for the defense of this country, and so on and so on. So, well, what's the problem? Now, if you have a problem with Jews in general or something, right now we have a lot of anti-Semitism, but again, within people that I meet, I don't see that. I'm talking now about the hostility to Israel, with the overt anti-Semitism that you see on the campuses, and some countries. Then that, I see that, I know. That is now overt anti-Semitism. It used to be hidden. Apparently, the Holocaust, with the 6 million dead Jews, got us a period of 60, 70 years when it was not fashionable to be an open anti-Semitic. So now that's not the case anymore. No, it's okay to be in the open, and people do that. But again, I don't think that anti-Semitism went anywhere. It stayed here with some people. I felt that when I was in France, when I worked in France after the Technion. In that place where I worked, there was a guy that was pretty critical of Jews, not totally overt and this and that. One time I remember an incident. We were all walking somewhere, and I asked him about that French place called Lourdes. That's a Catholic place where some saint did some miracle, and people go there, throw their crutches and all that, and they're healed and all that. And so I kind of asked him about what he thinks about that, about this thing. He says, well, on the way there you pass through, an entry road or something, let's say, I don't know, half a mile, and that's where they sell all kind of junk related to this place and the miracles in it. And he says, most of these guys are Jews. And another one of the guys, a French guy, he was not a Jew, he said, so what's your problem? Is anybody forcing to buy from these Jews? If these people would buy, why wouldn't a Jew sell them? What's your problem with that? So you could see that anti-Semitism there. It wasn't very pleasant to us. There were two of us in that place from the Technion, and you could see that. So I've seen anti-Semitism.
Is there anything in the US? Let's say you mentioned things in workplace and uncomfortable and anything there?
No, not really, not really. How shall I say? You see people not being promoted, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't anti-Semitism. How can you tell? Unless you did something that really deserved and you didn't get it. It wasn't the case with me. I felt that I was treated relatively fairly, okay? So I have no complaint of that. Attitude of co-workers, that's a different thing. You could sometimes feel this and that. And, you hear a comment like, the head of our division, so that's a very high position, was a Jewish guy. And somebody once said, hey, he got there, so you cannot tell me now that the Jews cannot get, okay. He was a Catholic, so that's okay. And then there was another guy, yet another Catholic, and he didn't like me at all. And there was really no good reason for that. So again, it's a matter of feeling, but nothing like somebody attacking me verbally or otherwise. Nothing like saying all kind of nonsense about, say, Israel, or about Jews killing Jesus, or anything, nothing like that. So I haven't run into anything like that.
And what do you think in terms of anti-Semitism today? Where is it at? Is it worse than what in previous decades, or the same?
Yes,
how would you
I think so. Mm-hmm. Well, the obvious place is in the universities, and I think it took about 40 years for Qatar and other Arab countries to buy themselves into campuses of major universities, establish departments of Middle Eastern studies and other things, and then also in the humanities. You don't see that much in the hard sciences. You see that in the softer disciplines. And then combined with that, there is also the leftist approach, the liberal progressive approach, which now with the critical race theory contends that whites are the bad guys and Jews are defined as whites. So we're oppressors. If you're not white, then you're oppressed, and you always be like that. And so, the attitude of the left, and again, this is the confluence of the fundamentalist Islam, the hard left, including LGBT and all that kind of stuff, that they are anti-Semitic. There is no way around it. My oldest grandson attended UCI. He graduated back in, I think, 2018. He was there for 4 years. And every year they had Israel Apartheid Week, and then they had Israel Week and all that kind of stuff. And so you could see the attitude, and you could see the university being kind of very concerned to let the anti-Semites have their way, freedom of speech and all that kind of stuff, and unless it's physical, it's okay, and all that. So it was coming. It was coming. The problem, the way I see it, is that Jews are only the first in the line of fire. America is next. It's not only death to Israel, it's also death to America. And then you have the anarchists who would like nothing more than to indeed bring down the establishment, the law and order in this country. So whatever happened in, say, Seattle and Portland back during the George Floyd time, they're trying to do it now again. So they found the new cause. It's Gaza, it's Hamas. So much for that. So yeah, it is a long way of saying, yeah, I think that we have a very overt, very strong anti-Semitism here, one that this country should take care of, not just because of the Jews, but because of this country. It's not a freedom of speech. It's not a matter of, is it freedom? Does it, like that Harvard head that didn't know that killing the Jews is against the rules of the laws of Harvard. She wasn't sure about that. It depended on the context. You couldn't believe. So that has to be taken care of. And I believe that at some point it will come. If the Democrats lose this election in November, I don't know what will happen, but maybe we will be on the Democrats at this point. I don't know. Their left wing, their extreme left wing, that's ruling them. Biden is very concerned about them. Biden is afraid to be against them and is pressuring Israel with Hamas and Gaza and all that. And it's all because of Michigan. He's afraid he will lose there with the Muslim population there, which is very much against helping Israel in any way. So, yeah, we'll see what happens after November. But this country will have to take care of that anti-Semitism, which is only the first part of what's going to happen here. And I believe that we are beginning to see in Europe, in Western Europe, they had the elections now to the European Parliament, where in many places the right wing won. So they are beginning to recognize that they have a problem there.
What kind of problem?
Anti-Semitism, but it's not anti-Semitism only. It is quite open. They have a lot of Muslim immigrants who are quite open that they want to establish Sharia law as the law of the country. You could see that in Great Britain, where Muslims board their own areas, under which it's not British law, but it's Sharia law that governs.
So do you see the threat not as coming from the far right, but coming from the far left and religious fundamentalists? Is that what you're saying?
Right now, I believe it's the far left. Again, it's a confluence of anarchist, far left, and the Islamic fundamentalism. They are now united in wanting to destroy Israel. It's not just Gaza. It's not just the West Bank. It's not Palestine. They don't care about that. What they want is to destroy Israel, period. So there is a lot more than that. Next is going to be this country. And that's the left. The right, yeah, they have their anti-Semitism there, but the danger is not from the right. Most of the right is not anti-Semitic. Yeah, there is hard right that is, absolutely. But right now, what you see up open, the very vocal part of anti-Semitism is coming from the left. Plus, of course, Muslims.
Can you say what significance is there, if any, about you sharing your testimony today?
Well, started a while ago with the Holocaust deniers, and the fact that Holocaust survivors are going away. We are going away. I was a child and I'm already 86 years old. So even if I reach a few more years, there will be a point in 10, 15, 20 years where there will be no more Holocaust survivors. It's important to keep the history of the Holocaust, to make sure that we understand that it cannot be repeated. And a good way to do it is to have people tell their stories, what happened to them, so that everybody knows that this part of Jewish history, it's important for the following generation to know that. My children don't really know. They're aware of a lot of things, but they will want to watch and see this interview and hear more about me, but also about the Holocaust. So it's important that we have there. You're not the only project going on. Obviously, there is the Holocaust museums, Yad Vashem in Israel, that do a very good job of making sure that we all remember what happened. So it's important for history and for not repeating that. And when we say never again, well, it happened again. It happened in Gaza, it happened in Rwanda, it happened in Cambodia. So there is no such thing, never again. It happened again, it will continue to happen again. So it's important that we know that.
And would you have any message or hope that you'd like to say to future generations of people who might watch this interview?
Well, there is a big difference between then and now. We have Israel now, we have a Jewish state, which is showing that they know how to defend on Jews. Without Israel, there will be really no Jews, especially now. If they manage somehow to destroy Israel, that's the end of the Jewish people. That's my opinion. So it's important to understand there is a Jewish state, Jew and Israel will prevail over Hamas, despite Biden, despite the UN, despite Western Europe, which is really interfering very badly, not letting Israel win that war. We will win that war. Israel will win that war. Israel has no choice. Hamas already said they will repeat October 7 time and time again until they destroy Israel. They told that clearly and openly. They recorded what they did on October 7. It's out there. You could see how they killed 1,200 people. You could see the atrocities that they performed. They intend to do it again and again. So Israel has no choice. They have to destroy Hamas, at least in terms of military capabilities, governing capabilities, ideology. You cannot destroy that. That's in the mind of people. So that's not going to go away. But you cannot let them have any physical capability to do damage, to do harm. That's the main thing. And I hope Israel will be able to accomplish that. I really hope. Israel had a major failure on October 7 on many fronts, not just the intelligence, not just that the military wasn't there, not just not understanding what Hamas was going to do. There were many, many failures. Despite that, Israel must prevail. Israel must regroup, correct what needs to be corrected, and not let Hamas and its ilk. I'm talking also about Fatah, about the Islamic Jihad and PFLP, a lot of other terrorist organizations, they do exactly the same thing that Hamas wants. They are all the same. So that must be taken care of. You cannot let them do it again.
Before we finish the interview, do you have any last sort of words or thoughts, that, things we haven't covered yet that you'd like to say?
Well, I think we really covered just about, don't say I went off tangent here and there, but that's okay. No, I think that the last thought is, again, it's concerning what we just talked about, which is we Jews the Jewish people have been through a lot of things over the ages, and we have survived. We will survive again. Israel is here, and it stays here. So we will survive. I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned about what will happen while we do that. But again, this is the fate of the Jewish people. Every once in a while, we go through a lot of turmoil, a lot of bad times, but we survive. And we will survive again. They cannot do it to us. They will not be able to.
Thank you.
Thank you for interviewing me.
Please tell us who's in this photo.
Well, this is my paternal family and my mother. This picture was taken back in 1927, so we're getting close to 100 years old. On the far left, up there, that's my dad. This is my mother, right here. Paternal grandparents. My uncle, my father's brother. This is my mother's aunt.
What's her name?
Sorry?
The aunt, what is her name?
Her name is Leah.
And the uncle up here?
The uncle is Albert.
Mm-hmm.
My father is Eliezer. And Leah is the sister of my grandmother, Rina. And this is my father, Shmuel, grandfather Shmuel, after which I am named. The rest of the group are just neighbors. That's what I was told. That's it.
And where was this picture taken?
This picture was taken in Shumen, 27, so my father would have been then 16, 17 years old.
Thank you. And who's in this photograph?
Well, in this photograph, it's me and my younger brother. I'm guessing, since he's lying there in the baby carriage, that this is in 1941. He was born in January of 41, and at that time I was 3 years old. So he's a few months old. I'm about 3 years old, going on 4.
And where would it have been taken?
This was taken in Sofia.
Thank you.
Well, that's a picture of my dad, my brother and I. And I'm guessing that I'm 4 years old here. My brother should be maybe 2 years old, 1 to 2 years old. And again, that someplace in Sofia.
This is still in Sofia before you left?
Yes, yes. At that time, we still lived in Sofia, so it's still there.
Thank you.
Okay, this is our family, still in Sofia. And looking at my younger brother, who is still a baby there, so I'm guessing this was taken in 1941 maybe. My father is in his military uniform. He was a officer in the Bulgarian army. He served in the artillery corps. And this was taken apparently in our apartment, someplace up on the, not even sure exactly where, but we were still in Sofia at that time.
And why would he have been wearing a military uniform at that time?
Well, he was serving in the military, and that was before we were exiled from Sofia, and he went into a work camp. So at that time, as you can see, he was still doing his duty during the war.
Thank you.
Okay, this is my mother and my younger brother and I. And this is the Danube River. We are in Vidin after we were exiled from Sofia. So this is probably 1943. And we had a good time here. This is during the summer. As you can see, it was a nice place.
Thank you.
Okay, we are in Vidin at my maternal grandmother's place, and I'm with my younger brother down there. As you can see, it's winter time. My mother is on the left, my father is in the middle, and my maternal grandmother is on the right. So a nice picture. This is the yard of her house where we lived with her. And I'm guessing again that this must be winter of 43 to 44.
And do you know, how did you come to have these photographs?
My father was a photography fan. He had a box camera. He took a lot of pictures, and this is one of them. I inherited a love of photography from him, and I'm continuing to this day with that. But yeah, we have many more pictures. Before my brother passed away, he scanned a lot of photos that were over there, and I have a CD here with them. This is where these pictures came from.
Thank you.
Okay, this picture shows our grandkids, not all of them, 7 out of 8. They range in age from, say, 11 to 29 years old. And the 29-year-old is not here. This picture was taken a few years ago, and some of them are pretty grown up already. That's the best that we have right now.
Thank you.